Good afternoon. This is Luke Lindberg, Senior Vice President for External Engagement at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. It's my pleasure to help moderate today's discussion, a teleconference on strengthening American competitiveness, a conversation with EXIM's President and Chairman, Kimberly Reed, and U.S. exporters in space technology. Today's meeting will run roughly 1 hour, and it's my pleasure to introduce, for opening remarks, EXIM's President and Chairman, Kimberly Reed.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you to everyone. Greetings from Washington, D.C. This is the 5th installment of the Export-Import Bank of the United States Strengthening American Competitiveness Initiative. This series of public teleconferences with American businesses and other stakeholders is helping EXIM support our great U.S. exporters as they compete with China around the world. Our program on China and transformational exports is a part of one of the most vitally important projects ever for EXIM, which Congress and President Trump directed us to make as a major part of our mission. This program is not just about America competing in the fast-changing global economy, it's a crucial tool to advance U.S. leadership around the world. Under EXIM's new 7-year authorization, the longest in our 86-year history, our goal is that at least 20% of this agency's total financing authority, or $27 billion of $135 billion, be devoted to exports that compete directly with China. We have over 300 people on this call right now, from businesses, think tanks, defense, and the media, and this great interest reflects the importance of this new effort. We have previously conducted these teleconferences with other sectors, a total of 4 times before now, and the information and insights have been invaluable for us at EXIM. The innovators in various technological sectors have all given us candid and illuminating observations. Media coverage of our past teleconferences report how technology leaders said they want more EXIM financing so they can compete more effectively with China. This call today is the 5th of 8 industry-specific teleconferences. Upcoming calls will focus on biotechnology, semiconductors, and emerging fintech, but today's discussion is on space technology. Like the previous calls, I want to remind our listeners that this discussion is on the record. As space tech leaders we have with us today are well aware, this month marks the anniversary of America's moon landing. 51 years ago, Neil Armstrong took one small step for man, and I am excited that President Trump has committed our nation to a giant leap for womankind by landing an American woman on the lunar surface by 2024. And in joking, I've already sent NASA as the first president and chairman of EXIM that's a woman my spacesuit size, so I hope everyone's listening. When it comes to China and space, unfortunately, we know that space is today being used for predatory purposes. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission was established 20 years ago by the Congress to monitor and investigate the national security implications of the People's Republic of China's trade and economic activity vis-a-vis the United States. The Commission's 2019 report to Congress warned that Beijing aims to capture important sectors of the global commercial space industry, including through partnerships under what it has termed the Space Silk Road. The Commission's report added that China has jump-started its domestic space industry by engaging in an extensive campaign of intellectual property theft, generous state support to commercial startups, and predatory pricing for Chinese space services in the global space market. It said some of these initiatives are already challenging the U.S. space industry and U.S. leadership on the international space cooperation. The Commission's findings make it clear that Beijing is using aggressive state-backed financing to capture increasing market shares of the world's commercial launch and satellite markets, making it much harder for the United States and our great companies to compete. Consider the fact that nearly 90 new space companies established since 2014, most are supported either by the Chinese military, China's defense industrial base, or Chinese state-owned R&D entities. Beijing is driving out foreign competition and gaining control of the supply chain. One example being its 70% global domination of the mining, refining, and production of uranium, a commodity that is essential for the solar panels used in satellites. The Commission's report noted that the production of satellite solar panels is effectively impossible without China's raw materials. Then there is DoD's latest China military power report, which points out that China's officially designated space as a new domain of warfare in its 2015 Defense White Paper, highlighting the importance of the space domain in the strategic military competition. These facts are all tremendously disturbing. Obviously, the commercial and military domination of space by Beijing is not something the U.S. and the free world can live with. Those joining us on this call today have a deep understanding of the relationship between space and other advanced technologies, the global marketplace in security and defense. EXIM's mission is to support American jobs by facilitating U.S. exports. My fantastic team and I have a few questions for the business leaders we have with us today, such as, what barriers prevent you from seeking or securing EXIM support? What is your sense of how EXIM can further serve exporting needs? What is your latest sense of how you are facing state-backed competition from China and or any other country? What is the nature of your offerings, U.S. content, and the value derived out of the United States? In other words, how do you and how should we think about how to value that portion of your offering that comes from the United States? How many U.S.-based jobs are involved in what you offer? To what extent is China also a noteworthy market for you? And do you have any ideas about how to foster an improved global business atmosphere, including for those Chinese companies that want to compete in a fair and open manner? Over a dozen EXIM staff are on the line and eager to hear your views and to act on them. That's what we're here to do today, to listen to you. This includes Dave Trulio, my counselor and strategic advisor who comes to EXIM from the Department of Defense and is leading our new program on China and transformational exports. His expertise and leadership on Chinese threats and influence extend from senior roles within the Pentagon to the international activities of major aerospace and defense manufacturers. Riza Nikfarjam, the head of business development of the technology sector of EXIM's Project Finance Division, also is with us. But first, you will hear from my wonderful EXIM colleague on our board of directors, Judith Pryor. Judith's years' worth of expertise on satellite communications includes work with World Space Incorporated, ComSat, and Orion Network Systems. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Judith. I'll now turn it over to you.
Director Pryor, you're muted.
Hello, Director Pryor. I see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you right now. You might need to change the audio device. Oh, is that you, Director Pryor?
You know, I had this problem yesterday.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I will not use my headset. I had this problem yesterday, and I wonder if it's maybe not my headset. Anyway, I'll just keep going here. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you. Thank you, Chairman Reed. You know, as I started to say, I've been listening to these calls now over the last several months, and I'm really especially thrilled to join today for a sector that's so near and dear to my heart, space. Most of you don't know this, now you do with Kimberly's comments, but I spent about 20 years in the satellite industry, which seemed like the safest way for me, a motion sickness sufferer, to live my dream of becoming an astronaut. Without the engineering brain for flight, though, and certainly no stomach to go along with it, sitting in the viewing room at command and control and watching those giant rockets launch with huge payloads was a pretty close second to a dream come true. My experience, though it started in the dinosaur age of geostationary birds, leaves me very enthusiastic about our potential for partnership opportunities today. You know, space technologies really have the potential to be transformative in many ways and in many locations, including rural communities and also developing economies, where I've done quite a bit of work. And satellites can remove that last mile requirement that can make the difference between a project completion and, pun intended, failure to launch, and improve everything from weather forecasting to mobile banking to access to education. Space technologies can be harnessed to advance sustainable development goals of the UN, including food security and agriculture, improved health outcomes, and natural resource and environmental management. And since the US has historically maintained top positions globally in satellite manufacturing, in commercial launch services, and even in network services equipment, it makes sense to me that XM would be a good financial partner for you. So we're ready to lean in and help you take advantage of opportunities to grow your business. And we have a long track record to support that dates back to the early 1960s. In the last decade, XM's authorized about $5 billion in financing to support the export of American space products. Of course, it might have been an even larger number, much greater than that, had we not lost our board quorum for 4 years, rendering the agency really just unable to support any transactions over $10 million. It certainly resulted in lost opportunities for the American space industry. But now we're back, and I, for one, am grateful for folks like Reza, who Kimberly mentioned, who are keeping abreast of industry opportunities for XM, and for our Congress, who threw their heft behind a 7-year reauthorization, which is the longest in the agency's history. They've asked us to lean into specific high-tech industries, many of which can be enhanced by the satellite technologies that many of you provide. Our past book, the $5 billion I referred to earlier, was mostly geostationary satellites and related launch services. And today we've seen an uptick in a variety of non-geo requests, everything from LEOs and MEOs, Earth observation and remote sensing, in-orbit spacecraft servicing, even space tourism. All are new opportunities to further the XM space industry partnership. I know you have fierce international competition. I also know that foreign buyers prefer what American companies have to offer: precision technology, quality product, business know-how, and financing with a partner like XM. We also know there are some barriers to winning those contracts, and I hope that we explore that in today's conversation. Our goal is simple at XM, and that's to provide you with the tools that you need to compete globally and on a level playing field. We really value your input, so thank you again for being here today. David Trulio, I think, is on the agenda next.
All good. Thank you, Director Pryor. We certainly appreciate those comments and your leadership in this issue. Mr. David Trulio, we would love to have you step in next. Thank you. David,
Luke, trying one more time.
There you go. Now we can hear you there.
Okay, excellent. Let me do this.
David, we lost you again. I'm going to keep moving forward, David. We'll get you looped in here when we have a second.
Luke, I think I'm back. Does that? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again, Director Pryor and Chairman Reed. Really appreciate it. Again, David Trulio, Senior Vice President for the Program on China and Transformational Exports. I'm going to go very briefly to the next level of detail beyond the overall context and framework that Chairman Reed and Director Pryor laid out for us. I'm responsible to work with stakeholders and the EXIM team to very quickly establish and lead this congressionally directed program on China and transformational exports. So the context is crucial for our discussion. And really, the purpose of the program is to support the extension of loans, guarantees, and insurance at rates and on terms and other conditions to the extent practicable that are fully competitive with the rates, terms, and other conditions established by the People's Republic of China. And it's also valuable to know that the bipartisan legislation that President Trump signed into law in December sets forth that the program is intended to directly neutralize export subsidies for competing goods and services financed by the PRC. Congress intended the program to advance the comparative leadership of the United States and to support U.S. innovation, employment, and technological standards. So it's a crucial mandate that we're working to operationalize. And as you can imagine, we're sorting through a number of stand-up issues and goals and metrics, but I really want to emphasize here today how important it is to hear from companies that are actually doing business and competing head-to-head with Chinese-backed companies. And I really want to emphasize that it's crucial that this program, for it to be successful, notwithstanding all the activity, that it achieve tangible results in the form of completed deals that help specific businesses here in the United States generate exports and support U.S. jobs. So it's really important that we identify potential new deals early and that be a collaboration with industry partners and with related stakeholders, and that we be willing to think openly about how we can further deliver on our mission of supporting American jobs. So I'm going to pause there and hand it over to Reza Nikfarjam, who's the head of business development here in our technology sector in the EXIM project finance team. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks, David, and thanks to all of you for participating today. This is Reza Nikfarjam, Lead Origination Officer for Technology Sector at EXIM, part of the satellite industry deal team, and have had the pleasure of interfacing with many of you over the years as your primary point of contact for transactional matters related to the sector. As you heard from EXIM senior leadership, it is paramount that we hear from you directly on how EXIM can be a more effective partner in leveling the playing field for you as you export your products and services globally. Your input will guide our evolution, allow us to design new or enhance existing products to provide you with best-in-class export finance solutions. EXIM is no stranger to space and satellite community. We've been at the forefront of supporting this sector since its inception. And because of that, EXIM is one of the few export credit agencies in the world that has specialized knowledge and a deep bench in provision of financing for the sector. We've had a series of successful co-creation calls with some of you over the last few weeks, which have been of tremendous value. Due to the industry's familiarity with EXIM, we've been able to gather very substantive feedback from industry stakeholders. We'll be hearing from them directly momentarily, but I'll briefly summarize some of their most pressing challenges and highlight some of their recommendations for EXIM. U.S. exporters face fierce competition in the sector, not only from China, but also from countries within the OECD. These countries have also recognized the strategic importance of this sector and have been putting the weight of their entire governments behind their domestic exporters. While U.S. has historically enjoyed a dominant position in various segments of this market, other nations have not sit idly by and are increasingly aiming to take market share from U.S. Stakeholders have noted that EXIM is sometimes perceived as one of the most risk-aware export credit agency among its peers when it comes to its underwriting standards and procedures. This perception alone has in some instances disadvantaged U.S. exporters from winning opportunities at the earlier stages of their export sales cycle. Reduction in space infrastructure development costs and the advent of new technologies has made the industry become more competitive than ever before. Both commercial and technology risks tend to be higher now, and due to shorter tenor of commercial contracts and utilization of first-of-a-kind inventions in space systems. We also now see transaction ticket sizes that are more wide-ranging, from sub-$10 million one-off launch services or ground terminal exports to multi-billion-dollar contracts for satellite constellation projects. Industry has voiced the need for XM to increase its awareness and outreach surrounding its products, requirements, and processes. There's a need for increased interagency outreach and coordination with considering transactions so that a whole-of-government approach could support U.S. companies with export sales. Lastly, stakeholders have expressed the need for more innovative financing products at XM to address the higher credit risk within the industry and be more accommodative of smaller transaction sizes. We acknowledge that we need to continue our dialogue with industry experts throughout the process, and we encourage you to engage us as early as possible in your export sales cycle, introduce transactional opportunities to us, and allow for sufficient lead time in addressing any potential challenges that may arise. Glad you've taken advantage of this opportunity to provide your suggestions to Chairman Reed, senior leadership, and staff. We look forward to continue working with you and strengthen our partnership with the goal of improving your competitiveness on a global scale. With that, I'll yield back to you, Luke.
Thank you, Reza. We certainly appreciate all the hard work you've done in this area or industry. I know a lot of these folks on the call today have been in constant contact with you over several years, and your leadership is always appreciated, so thank you. Moving on to the next portion of our agenda, we're going to now hear from our industry partners their thoughts and feelings about ways in which XM can strategically look at ways to better support their industry. And I think we have a great opportunity to start today's discussion with Ravi Shingler, who is the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Planet. Ravi, will you join us and give us your opening thoughts?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. Thank you very much. Can you guys all hear me?
Yeah, hear you very well. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Chairman Reed and the entire XM team, and the interest in this strategic sector that's undergoing a bit of a transition and transformation over the course of this decade. And I would contend that we're about halfway through a massive transition as space is going from being purely for civil purposes and national security purposes for more commercial products and services. As a bit of a very brief introduction for Planet to frame my remarks, we are a US-based VC-funded company, 8 years old, that have built and launched imaging satellites right here in the United States. Now, we don't sell satellites. We sell the access to the data that comes from it and the value-added products that come on top of that. We have launched over 400 satellites in the last 6 years. We operate the world's largest constellation of imaging satellites today, and we image the entire world every day with an archive of about 1,400 images of the entire planet over the last 4 years. And we launch about 4 to 5. We're on 4 to 5 launches about every year or so, with about 40 new satellites. We have a model that we call Agile Aerospace, where we continuously upgrade our sensors in space, where we launch about a third of our fleet every year, so that we constantly adapt our products and services to meet our customers' needs. And today our industry in remote sensing is just getting to the web, so there's a massive market opportunity for this, and we sell globally. Last quarter alone, we had 17 new contracts directly with governments around the world, and we do run into a variety of challenges with some predatory pricing when it comes to state-backed companies and Chinese companies in particular. They are doing a bit of a fast following with new phenomenology, as John, I'm sure, is going to mention, and also for Planet. We pioneered the building of and operating of satellites in a diversified, decentralized manner that leads to resiliency as well as upgradability. And there are Chinese companies that are state-backed that are coming after the direct products and services that we've been operating for the last few years. So two or three suggested things that we can talk about in the Q&A today. One is we look forward to partnering with XM for supporting not just the exporting of satellites and selling of satellites to a foreign customer or a launch vehicle, but also how do we package up products that use space technology and its deep tech supply chain here in the United States to support data subscriptions rather than purely just exports of hardware. Also, previously before, Planet has looked at project finance, which is a great way to have your capital expenditures invested in with loans. That is what the geostationary telco community uses quite a bit, and Planet is looking into doing that as well. It typically means assignable of contracts, and there are some unique constraints that we have being a VC-funded company. And last is to encourage us to think about how can we leverage some loans for R&D that invest in the space industrial base here in the United States, but that then make new market-making opportunities for data subscriptions moving forward. So with that, I just want to say my thanks, and I look forward to the discussion. Back to you.
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate that. I think the idea discussed about packaging is really an important one that we should be considering. So appreciate that feedback. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Estey, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Maxar. Paul?
Yeah, good afternoon, Luke, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss our experiences with XM Bank and our suggestions for working better together in the future. To start, let me explain for those of you who don't know us that Maxar is a space company that manufactures and operates satellites for communications, Earth observation, and scientific missions. In total, Maxar employs approximately 4,000 people, with 1,500 people based here in Silicon Valley, where our satellite manufacturing operations are situated. In addition to manufacture the satellites, we purchase components from a large supply chain around the world, with more than 60% of our suppliers based here in the United States. Our prior experience with XM Bank was positive in that our customers received financing, and as a result, we were awarded a contract to build a communication satellite. The XM satellite finance team is experienced and maintains an excellent knowledge of the space technology sector. Over the years, they've developed a history of past deals that enable them to review and consider new deals with the benefit of this experience. The team is of the best in the ECA field worldwide. We understand that the recent slowdown of the bank has affected this capability, and we hope that the bank works to maintain and strengthen the team working the space segment. As new entrants like the Chinese increasingly enter international competition, it's critical that XM keep pace with the finance process available to our foreign competition, so financing does not become an unfair advantage. The XM processes should be continually reviewed in light of these competitive developments, so the bank's necessary financial diligence is executed in a timely manner and with appropriate management judgment with respect to risk and national interest. It may be necessary for XM to strengthen its internal capacity to meet this goal. Our recommendation would be for the bank to do more of its own due diligence, thus speeding up the process and better ensuring a balanced approach to risk. Maxar would like the bank to allow flexibility to the U.S. content requirement. Other ECAs tend to look at the net benefit to the home country rather than define a strict content limit. Specifically, USXM should be allowed to finance foreign launches for U.S. supplied satellite, so our customers have a one-stop shop for financing. We'd like to point out that satellite finance cannot fit within a classic project finance structure. There are certain risks that cannot be mitigated in the same way as in other sectors. An example of this are launch delays and a long-term lease contract renewals that our customers had. It would be in XM's interest to incorporate these well-known aspects into the XM process and assessment criteria in advance of any given deal. As for competition from the Chinese, the satellite marketing and commercial arm, China Great Wall Industry Corporation, has emerged as a strong competitor within the communication satellite marketplace. They offer extremely attractive financing, which generally includes full financing of the satellite and associated ground equipment, launch, and insurance. Furthermore, in some deals, they have allowed the satellite operator to begin repayment of the 10-plus year loan 1 or 2 years after the satellite is built, launched, and generating revenue. In addition, we've evidenced lately of significantly reduced requirements for equity contribution. These types of deals are very concerning to us. In closing, I'd like to thank you all for inviting us to this session and look forward to answering any questions you might have during the Q&A period.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's really helpful data and information to provide. One of the things I know my colleague Dave Trulio is looking for are examples like the ones you just described, so that we can help articulate internally and externally exactly what the Chinese are doing in this space and justify the purpose of the program that Congress has authorized for us to enact. So that's those types of examples are extremely helpful for us. Next up in our speaker list, we're pleased to have Stephanie Bednarek, Director of Commercial Sales at SpaceX. Stephanie, I know you have been to XSIM several times and worked closely with Reza. I'm looking forward to your comments today.
Sure, absolutely. Just to check, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much for including me. Just a quick introduction. Again, my name is Stephanie Bednarek, and my role at SpaceX is to work with SpaceX's commercial non-US government customers. As a brief introduction to the company, SpaceX designs, manufactures, and launches advanced rockets and spacecraft, and our mission really is to revolutionize space technology. And a key element of that is our developments in rocket reusability to help not only increase the reliability of access to space, but also lower the cost. To date, SpaceX has successfully completed 92 orbital flights, and we have another one coming up in just another couple of days. SpaceX is an all-American company. We have 8,000 employees, over 8,000 employees directly at SpaceX. We are over 95% US content on the Falcon fleet and support thousands of suppliers and tens of thousands of indirect jobs in nearly all 50 states here in the US. Every launch we sell supports a robust nationwide space industrial base. One thing I would like to point out is that with the entry of SpaceX into the commercial launch market, we have successfully restored US leadership in space launch. In 2010, the US had 0% of the commercial launch share, and now in 2020, we were seeing about 65% of that share, and that is thanks to SpaceX's efforts in this area. Overall, in the industry, SpaceX has been highly disruptive. And as a result, foreign, primarily state-backed competitors are leveraging every tool that they have to overcome SpaceX's position in the market. And so when we look at how XM can support SpaceX in being successful in the commercial market, it's really a part of a U.S. whole of government approach. And this includes support on multiple efforts, not just political, but also in terms of financing a competitive licensing regime and other areas. To date, XM has been very supportive of SpaceX's efforts to win international business, and we're grateful for that and the entire team at XM. Really, because we are primarily competing against state-backed launch service providers. Not only do we need on par terms, but also a strong business development effort. I think it's fair to say that SpaceX may view XM as an extension of our sales force and an asset that's really critical to help us win international business. Given the increase that we've seen in SpaceX in the U.S. commercial market share of launch, we certainly don't want to cede any of that, and we'd like to see that increase and keep growing. We do hear from our customer base that there are some perceptions that the bank that working with XM may be a slow process and uncertain if their application will be approved. So some of the suggestions that we have discussed before are to help increase the reputation of the bank's business, particularly with foreign satellite operators, to help them better understand the process of what's required to submit an application, what's involved in the due diligence process, and expedite the timeline for reviewing and approving applications. So with that, I'll wrap up my comments, but look forward to the question and answer section.
Thank you, Stephanie. I think that's also a very valuable piece of information for us is the education and outreach component. With our agency being shuttered for 4.5 years, there certainly is a reacclimation process that we're working through, and we appreciate your commitment to partnership on that and helping to sort of guide us through that process. So thank you. Next in line is John Serafini, Chief Executive Officer for Hawkeye 360. John, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Good?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, first of all, let me start by applauding XM Bank for including space in its China and Transformational Export program. That's excellent public policy on behalf of the United States. As Representative Mike Waltz mentioned yesterday at a different virtual conference, you can't be #1 in the world, but be #2 in space. So I'm very pleased to see this initiative at Export. Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about Hawkeye. As Robbie alluded, we're kind of the poster child for the new people on the block. We're a new phenomenology in the commercial domain. Namely, we're tracking, identifying, and analyzing RF signals. This has always been a function of the U.S. government defense and intelligence apparatus, but now we're bringing it into the commercial realm. Company is well backed. We have the financing to support the development of a full constellation of spacecraft. And what we're building is a constellation initially of 6 clusters of small satellites that can essentially detect, track, geolocate, and analyze the signals above a watt in power between 150 megahertz and 15 gigahertz. And that creates a number of different value propositions, principally in creating really powerful ISR solutions for a number of different defense and intelligence operators. Clearly, we believe that the answer to the remote sensing challenges facing our government is not just EO, it's not just SAR, it's not just RF or even open source. It's the confluence of all of those in being able to fuse multiple different modalities of commercially collected intelligence together to apply some machine learning and artificial intelligence and produce turnkey data analytics that can help solve challenges and provide operators, be it the warfighter, be it analysts or decision makers, with intelligence solutions as opposed to just more data that they swim in. So that's what we're doing. Clearly, defense and intelligence is our backyard, but it's not just in the U.S. In fact, part of our charter as a commercial company is to sell internationally, and we do a lot of work internationally. I'd suggest that many new companies in the space domain, particularly remote sensing companies, we're definitely challenged and frustrated by the speed of export decisions on our respective products. Going through the TAA process or the CJ process or even DSP5s and taking months upon months to get decisions is unsatisfactory and needs to change over time. So to whatever extent the XM has soft power with that process, I think it should wield it so. The second piece, of course, similar on the regulatory side, is there needs to be a level playing field. It has to be a level playing field. It is inappropriate and unacceptable for U.S. companies not to be able to export certain capabilities that are already available in the commercial domain from international competitors. That puts us with 2 strikes as we try to compete. And I'm sure that the appropriate regulatory bodies will be making adjustments in the days and months to come. We have not used XM in the past as a financing vehicle. As we start to scale up the size of our constellation and our revenues increase in complexity, it certainly has become a more attractive vehicle for us to consider. And I think we will do so. Similar to Robbie's mention, we're not selling satellites, we're not selling algorithms, we're selling data analytics as a service, software as a service provided as a subscription, and that it doesn't become an extremely costly endeavor for certain governments to be able to purchase. But when we start talking about second-tier nations that don't have the kind of resources that Five Eye countries do, XM financing could become a very viable opportunity for us to consider. Now, also of interest is working with defense industrial base entities that have enormous offset requirements given certain nationalities, requirements for offset programs, and seeing if there's an interesting way that XM can help those defense industrial base entities deploy those offset credits, particularly with regard to using new remote sensing modalities like Hawkeye or Plant or others. So I'll pause there and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
John, thanks for that feedback. I look forward to the first time we're going to get an application from Hawkeye 360 in the EXIM pipeline, where it's going to be a good day for both of us. Next on our list here is Grant Barber, Chief Financial Officer for Hughes Communications Incorporated. Grant. Grant, I'm unable to hear you. I can see on the screen. It's showing you're muted.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
I can now, yes, great, thank you.
Okay, sorry, perfect. All right, so we got the opportunity to present on behalf of Jennifer Manner, myself, and the entire Hughes and EchoStar team. We're honored and privileged to be able to give whatever comments and help we can. Hughes is well known in the satellite space as we're coming up to our 50th anniversary in the space next year from our infancy days based here just outside of Washington, D.C. We initially used other people's satellites to provide high-speed internet to consumer and enterprises, to 2007 when we launched our first satellite, Spaceway, and then a series of Jupiter satellites in 2012, 16, and anxiously waiting Jupiter 3, which is our next high throughput satellite that Paul's team are building for us at Maxar. We understand the process very well with EXIM, have worked with Reza and the team over the years. When you're looking at roughly $800 million for satellite launch and insurance all in, the process is robust, thorough, and I think well understood. In recent years, I would say we're fortunate enough to be well capitalized and able to cover that piece of it ourselves. What we're looking at on the international side is supporting our international customers as they're going into service in their countries. And if you can picture what they're up to, then we initially build a NOC for them, series of computer equipment that drive their network. They'll have milestone payments to us. They then may get a series of initial VSAT or satellite terminals, 500 to 1,000 of them, and they'll have their own installation and operations and support. So they're probably all in a range of $5 to $15 million up front before they see a dollar of revenue from their business. So that's really what we're looking at. We think could help our business, as some of the customers in the various international areas could find an easier package to run them through all of the discipline that we would have in a multiple hundreds of millions of dollars of a deal. It just takes too long, too aggressive. They may not have the discipline in a 15-year business plan that most of the the larger ones will be able to put together, and they're just not as disciplined as that. We've done a similar piece on our own individual businesses here, where we went to my own small and medium-sized enterprise businesses in the US and said they look at needing some financing. We self-finance a lot of it. We set up a small package that they could fill out easy, quickly. We could accept and move on. And we've taken that into several $1 million a month now in business in that area. So I know we've had international customers request of us quick and easier packages that might be able to assist in the export side of what we could provide to them. So I saw Reza's comments that that we had widened the range at EXIM on areas of opportunity, and I think there's a real demand and pull through on the small side. And what it does for us in general is, we've got approximately 1.5 million subscribers that subscribe to our consumer platform, mostly in the US, but throughout Canada, Mexico, and most of South America now. Most of the US ones, they're local dealers and reps and agents and installers, and we're providing high-speed internet to consumer homes and schools and libraries, and quite honestly to students that wouldn't have access without our piece here. So while it's difficult to put a package together for the individual person in a remote or semi-urban area, it is the bread and butter of our business. And to be able to assist in some of the exports of very similar equipment around the rest of the world could be a big plus to us. We have approximately 2,200 people, most and about 1,600 of them here in either Maryland or California. We do our engineering, our design, our manufacturing, and export all from here. So it does, significantly drive jobs. And if we can help win some of these smaller jobs that keep us on the forefront of what we're good at, I think it'd be appreciated. I think that's all I had. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Yeah, you've been a great partner of ours, and we certainly appreciate the ongoing willingness to help us think through these items. But it's certainly appreciated. Last up in our speaker list, and by no means is last the worst position here, is we're looking forward to Pacome Revillion, Chief Executive Officer at Euroconsult. Pacome, we appreciate your comments today and welcome you to start.
Thanks. Do you hear me well?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Well, good morning. Thanks a lot for organizing this forum and for inviting me. So I'm certainly enjoy being Euroconsult CEO. We happen to have clients in approximately 50 countries. One of our activities for sure has been about due diligence for over $30 billion of investment in both project financing and M&A, and we have had the privilege to support EXIM on a variety of programs for more than 15 years, as far as I can remember. So sharing just a few thoughts and trying not to make too much repeat of all the comments we got. I think the first primary one is competition, and to understand really the importance of EXIM. I would not claim that certain other industries, or for example China, can necessarily meet all the technical capabilities that the US industry can deliver, even if they progress fast. I could say so that a number of their products and solutions would be good enough to meet a number of the commercial export requirements. Whereby certainly the ability to be competitive on all ways, and financing being a big and increasing part of it, is key certainly for all of the exports. A second comment is on the educational part. I think Stephanie touched on it. It's very important to understand that in particular in the space industry, you will have certain organizations procuring a space infrastructure or even a service, maybe, if very often every 3 years, if less often every 5, or maybe from time to time every 10 years or 8 to 10 years for a major program. Those organizations usually, or some of them being startup, are not so familiar with export credit processes at all, and even more possibly with what EXIM can offer. So the fact to both detect, but also organize some form of continuous relationship, educational part, I think would be quite critical, so that organizations are ready, and this is part of how some time can be optimized. The second, and I think it really brings all of the comments together, is the dramatic shift and diversity of satellite type solutions that we see today compared to just a few years back. We talk about the larger diversity of connectivity, telecom, but also remote sensing opportunities out there. But most of them are data centric. Most of them are shorter type contracts from the end clients, and as a result would have lower guaranteed future revenues. And in parallel to that, innovation goes that fast that the window opportunity for any new program could just be a few years to establish yourself in a market and a niche before someone else will try to come with another asset. So there's the ability to accelerate programs, manage due diligence to make sure to be in line with what the programs or the project holders expect is pretty key. And I think from the start, obviously, I appreciate that EXIM would have some requirement to look at the risk profile as part of its mandate. I think it's very important, and a struggle we've seen in just the last 3 to 4 years is the acceptable level of risk or the level of equity and what upfront the bank should be ready to support in terms of project profile, because we found, at least in a couple of situations, not just with Exim in the last 3 to 4 years, that a couple of programs end up in kind of a closed door or closed avenue, where at the end of the day, it was almost impossible to reconcile the program holder and the financing. And I think addressing that issue upfront to make sure to have a package or a path to the financing is pretty key for the efficiency and all the parties. And I would concur also to the comment from Paul that at equity level or risk sharing, it's very true that China has been ready to take very aggressive positions on at least a couple of programs that we've seen going up to full financing potentially, and at conditions that can be pretty aggressive. So I'm not sure that every single item would have to be matched, but clearly bridging the gap or you know, just undercutting some of the challenges would be important for any future export. And I may let it there for now, I guess.
That sounds good. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. We have only about 8 minutes left of today's call, and I want to make sure to start the Q&A portion, which may be slightly abbreviated, but to see if my colleague Dave Trulio has any follow-on questions specifically with respect to any of the comments made today.
Well, certainly, Luc, I really appreciate the insights. I want to revisit the theme of innovation in finance and come back to Paul from Maxar's comment about an insight about potentially financing foreign launches. Any further amplification of that, or any other ideas from some of the other speakers on that, or anything else on the innovation category when it comes to financing?
I think whatever happens, what you will see moving forward, and we've seen that in remote sensing, and to talk about one concrete case, there was one Chinese company who actually signed an export contract, I think in Ethiopia, that was a combination of ground segment service package working with a remote sensing data, in that case, from the Chinese industry. I think obviously the topic of the satellite launcher combination is key. And I know that Exim has also been cooperating. I think it was one of the questions at the start of the session. So the ability to cooperate or organize a package, so either everything financed from Exim or Exim acting as the leader to bridge a larger portfolio, and whether it could be a ground segment and a combination of remote sensing data package, or whether it could be telecom and ground segments or satellite and launch. For sure, I think for a number of stakeholders, having a one-stop shop and complete portfolio, bringing them ready to use space assets should be increasingly important moving forward. And it usually comes as well with some form of offset, training, and various things to help the export clients.
And I would add, Dave, that similar to what John stated and Grant stated, having smaller packages that can then also therefore move faster and or take on the appropriate risk for the amount of investment or loan that becomes available is something that then would allow for product companies in the United States to export those services abroad. And thereby that's strategic for our industrial base, and then also increasing our taxation base here in the United States. So smaller packages that take a bit more risk or allow for us to have a portfolio of packages that then adjust risk for the amount of loan.
Hi, this is Stephanie from SpaceX. I just wanted to follow up on both those comments. One, generally, I do think the idea of having a package approach with satellite launcher and possibly ground segment to be able to present to a customer a full all-American approach would be something that's very competitive, both for small satellites as a complete package, but also for larger programs. That would certainly be appealing to customers. I do have to challenge the notion, though, of XM financing foreign launches of U.S. satellites. I would rather see kind of a whole approach for supporting U.S. satellites, U.S. launch, and U.S. ground segment together as a package rather than separating that out. I don't really feel that that fits within XM's charter to support U.S. business to help finance foreign launches.
Great feedback, thank you. I do want to make sure that Director Pryor, who's deeply knowledgeable in this space, if she had any comments, questions, or issues she wanted to put on the table, has ample opportunity to do so.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
No, yes. Oh, good, the headsets are working. Okay, modern technology. Like I said, I'm best on the sidelines, but thank you, Dave. One thing, just going back to something that Grant Barber had mentioned from Hughes, of course, the NOx. That to me seems like a perfect opportunity for XM to participate in some type of, build out. And I'd love to hear more about some of the other things. I guess I would add that one question I have, and maybe this is for John or others, in helping us think outside the box. I mean, somebody said, it's easy to look at commercial launches, launch vehicles, Earth stations, network operation centers. Those are sort of structures that XM traditionally is very good at supporting. But it's some of the other things, the services. When you talked about remote sensing, John, and data analytics, I'm just if you, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that and how you see us working with you to be able to help you in your endeavors.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. I think there's a saying in venture capital that you want to unnaturally stack the deck to support your companies. And XM should think of all US space companies as being in your portfolio. And we want to unnaturally stack the deck to ensure Hawkeye and Planet and Black Sky and many others have an advantage to succeed, not just here in the US, but also internationally. The long and truth of it is companies like Hawkeye and others, we only get so much time to hang around the hoop. We only have so much capital that investors have provide to us. There's a small window to succeed, and we need all the support that we can get to maximize the return on our technology, not just for the beneficiaries on our cap table, but for the American taxpayer.
Yeah, and Pacom, maybe you could. It's nice to see you, by the way, Pacom. If you had any thoughts, I know we've met and discussed the industry, and thank you for bringing me into the 21st century on many things. Some of it is still quite traditional, but much of it is not. Any thoughts there? We often hear, talking about dinosaurs, we often hear that we're not agile enough, which we're working on. And as Luke mentioned, we've been shuttered for 4 years, so we're really kind of stepping back in wherever we can. But is there anything that you could add to this conversation, or any ideas you think we should take away?
No, yeah, sure. I think, and looking at Robbie's and John's particular businesses, but also some other value proposition, I think one aspect that we could see in the coming years is the notion of a virtual operator. So you could see transactions where a foreign client would take a certain volume of services, or would become a form of local integrator, would procure a significant amount of services, or even could, to a certain extent, lease a satellite in orbit. I know some companies have been proposing that, as opposed to own it strictly, which is just having a long-term leasing of your car, whatever. So that notion of virtual operator, what it means, who could be the clients, is it something acceptable in the terms of XM if the satellite or if the company owning assets, or let's say the technology or infrastructure is a US company, for example? I think it's the kind of notions that would certainly be worth exploring, and to see how this could be articulated. As I know, obviously, that where the asset would be, where the client, where the companies are, is also a key consideration in the ability of EXIM to support and the level of support it can provide.
Okay, all right, I'm muted. I would just, turning it back over to Dave. Thanks, Dave. But I don't envy him his task. I mean, Congress has sort of given us some dictates, but other than that, it's a pretty broad blank canvas, and this has been great food for thought. So I'm very appreciative of all the comments today. Thank you. Dave, back to you.
Thank you, Director Pryor. And I know we're a little over time here, but I want to make sure we capture as many insights as we can. Are there, based on the discussion, I do want to thank Stephanie, for example. There is a diversity of views on how we make the most of our mission of supporting American jobs by facilitating exports. So at times we'll disagree, and that's great. But I do want to make sure that if anybody else had additional comments or insights or other big ideas, that they put them on the table before we wrap up in a moment.
Well, let me just say that we're all in favor of Stephanie's all-American package idea. And we'd like to obviously do and see more of that. The other thing somebody touched on briefly is sort of the interagency support. If you look at China and some European countries, there's more of a tighter liaison, I guess is probably the proper word, between the financing agencies and the other agencies doing development work inside the country, particularly focused on space. And we would like to see more of that if that's feasible in your operations.
I think that falls neatly within the context of staying in close touch. We can absolutely, if we become aware of a challenge or an issue that isn't in our lane, but one of our interagency partners can, it makes perfect sense for us to pick up the phone or engage personally or in a variety of ways to raise an issue that has resonance to our core mission, and we're doing more and more of that. So in the context of being in close touch and trying to address opportunities and challenges early, that to me sounds like a great and important and actionable idea.
I'd like to echo that one more time too about the whole of government approach. EXIM is a critical puzzle piece. So is the regulatory regime is a critical puzzle piece, and also is the government as a customer. Again, we're undergoing a transition in the strategic sector where it is becoming more commercial, and part of that means that we have to shift how we currently inside the DoD and the IC fields its intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, or for its telecommunications missions. And successfully been able to do that in telco, and we're looking for that transition as the space becomes more commercial here. So the whole of government approach, I think, is critical. And the more that we think about this as a new frontier economy, there are reputable non-space studies that are coming out talking about the $1 trillion space economy. This is something that is being led by U.S. entrepreneurial businesses and is an opportunity for it to then be captured, where it then becomes part of the overall 21st century aerospace strategy for the nation. So I fully agree in a whole of government approach. And again, really thank you guys for your efforts.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. And look, we as an organization engage in counterpart discussions. Our leaders travel just like other departments and agencies do. So knowing from each of you what your priority countries are, not just on very well developed deals that are well underway, but where you're shaping, that's helpful for us to know as well. The other thing I'd like to kind of pick up on some earlier comments is, it would be great if one or more of you or all of you could identify a potential, test deal or a specific opportunity off of which we could invest the time and energy to think, well, is this an opportunity for us to do things differently potentially? Of course, we have a legal framework within which we operate, and the board, Chairman Reed, Director Pryor, and so on, have authority on things like content and so on. But if there's an opportunity around a specific deal, that's a great way to to test the art of the possible, as opposed to a theoretical discussion about this or that issue in Washington. So recognizing that time is money, and you're working very hard developing a number of deals. If you spot one or two or three where you think that this could be an opportunity for us as organizations to really explore what's possible, that would be very helpful. We're doing that just yesterday in a different industry, and we think it will bear fruit. But that's my call to action as we start to wrap up here. And I see Director Pryor, I think, wants to get in. So please, Director, over to you.
I just want to second exactly what Dave is saying, because sometimes you can talk about what isn't real, but let's not talk hypotheticals. If you have anything that you're thinking about, pick up the phone and call us, run the idea by us, then we can see what we can do. We've been given some pretty stiff objectives by Congress, which means, in my humble opinion, they have to give us a little more leeway than the lane that we've been operating in until now. So, that's why this is not the status quo. So let's see if we can't figure out how we can work together. This is an evolving industry. We are leaders in this industry. I want to see us continue to be world leaders in this field. And so again, just if you think of something, pick up the phone and call one of us, and let's just take it from there and see if we can't do something. Thanks.
Great, thank you, everyone. I want to see if Chairman Reed, if you have any final closing comments.
Absolutely. I want to thank everyone today. I'm so enthused about this discussion, and I'm smiling because we're here talking to you today because of a great action that Congress took and President Trump took when he signed into law Bill H.R. 1865 that extended us for historic 7 years. But before he did that very same evening, I and some of my EXIM colleagues were with him at Andrews Air Force Base, where he signed S-1790, the National Defense Authorization Act, which established the U.S. Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. And so we watched that. He then got on Air Force One and signed our reauthorization that included these 10 transformative sectors. It is our goal to do all we can to help the great American space industry. And your insights and candid discussion has just been really, really appreciated. We know that there are global security challenges, and information is power, especially when it comes to advanced technology, and you've just provided us with a great deal of valuable analysis. I also wanted to flag, we all know that economic security is national security, and if you've not seen our press release, it's on our website. On Tuesday, I presented to the U.S. House of Representatives Task Force on China. And I'm not sure if you know about this, if you read the release that we just put out. It's chaired by Mike McCall of Texas, and 15 members, very focused on key pillars that basically, I would say, align with what we're charged with in our reauthorization. But I think it's important that they also hear from you and your views when it comes to competition with China and our national security. And in my opening comments, I shared a lot about that. But I think that would be great. And earlier this morning, Dave Trulio and a couple other of my colleagues and I were gathered with an interagency group spearheaded by Undersecretary of State for Economics, Energy, and Environment Keith Kroc, something called the DEAL team. We met this morning at length. And we really want to do a whole government approach. And nothing would make me more proud that in the next 3 months, we actually get an application from someone in some great company supporting U.S. jobs when it comes to space. So that's my challenge. And I want to see something come to fruition that's just in a new, great way. So with that, thank you for your time. Have a great rest of the month, but I know that we'll be engaged with you, and thank you again.
Thank you, Chairman. This concludes today's call. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.
Thank you.